Welcome to Twice 5 Miles Radio, fertile ground for conversations worth listening to and remembering. I'm your host, James Navé, always airing first on WPVMLP Asheville 103.7, streaming online, WPVMFM.org, the voice of Asheville heard all over the world, and on other community radio stations like KCEI, Cultural Energy Radio out of Taos, New Mexico. Thank you, Walter Parks, for our theme song, walterparks.com for more on Walter's music. Davine Dial, thank you for managing WPVM-FM in Asheville, and Robin Collier for doing the same, KCEI, Cultural Energy Radio out of Taos. If you'd like to reach me, Navé at jamesnavé.com. Navé spelled N-A-V-E. I would love to hear from you. And I would like to remind you we're sponsored by the Imaginative Storm Writing Project. If you'd like to improve your writing skills, connect with a writing community that comes in globally from all over the world, imaginativestorm.com is a good place to start that search. We'd love to have you be part of our community. Today, I have on this call Regie Cabico. Regie is a poet, a spoken word artist, an activist, a producer, an organizer, a man who's been digging into the poetic sensibilities since I have known him. And I don't know when we first met. It was over 20 years ago. Many, many years have passed and lots of water under the bridge. And I'm reconnecting with Regie today because I like to have people I've known for a long time on this call, and I like to connect with poets. And so, Regie, welcome to Twice 5 Miles Radio.
Wow, it's great to be here. I would say not just 2 decades, maybe even 3 decades when we first met. Asheville, and it had to be 1994. You were there, I was there. Gosh, it's already 2024, and we are still kicking it with poetry. So I'm just excited to really be here, and especially during this new year, 2025 in a unprecedented whatever is going to happen is going to happen, but it's just great to just connect and have a poetic surf the wave.
Well, I love the idea of wave surfing. Speaking of waves and the waves that lapped into Asheville in 1994, since you brought it up, this show airs in Asheville. It also airs in Taos. Would you reflect a bit on your memories of that time in Asheville in 1994 when we first met? It was the National Poetry Slam Championships. And I'd like to do that because people enjoy those historical moments. And so often poets forget. The younger poets forget where all this came from. I'm going to an open mic later this week, the young poets in Manila, and I bet few of them would remember 30 years ago because they were not on Earth.
Well, shout out to all of my Filipino relatives there. I'm dying to go to my parents' birth country as a poet. Just happy that this genre of poetry slam, they've always called it a fad, but to me, it's an American art form. Being in my early 20s, fresh out of college, to be able to perform in that final stage, to visit North Carolina for the first time, there was something very magical, full of characters. To be performing your poem and to testify your truth in front of so many dynamic poets as yourself, living in New York at the time, and to just see the beauty of Asheville. And also, my heart goes out to all the residents of Asheville. I know that 24 was such a difficult year, but there was so much power and magic. And for myself, I really wanted to win the individual slam. Gail Danley is brilliant. Ironically, Gail Danley, the 94 Poetry Slam champion, is in Maryland, and we are reunited, and we're both poetry educators, and she is just as phenomenal and dynamic. And this is what I'm talking about. I think that I found friends and colleagues and people who took this competitive art of performance poetry and are still moving, whether it's in the classroom or in community spaces or through books. Giving truth and hope. There's a saying I have, the world may not be sturdy, but poetry will hold us up. I can't really fathom 30 years, but we just did together. So, and you look the same. So,
Well, we all look the same. We've just managed to add a few edges and shades and glimpses to us. I've been working on rememorizing 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird by Wallace Stevens. And it's the idea is there's always a blackbird in the scene. And sometimes it's on the edge, sometimes it's cutting across the icicles on the window, sometimes it's at the feet of the people in the street. Occasionally there are three in the trees, and one blows off in the wind, and then the blackbird disappears and it comes back again. And I love the idea of the blackbird being singular while at the same time included in the flock of blackbirds, thus the murmuration of blackbirds. I often think of the poetry and the people that I've known who speak it and write it as a big flock of murmurating blackbirds flying around, managing never to really bump into each other. And when they do, they don't mind it. That's the edges of things. So the poets work along the edges, but they also work right in the center of the action as well. So that's what I think you and I have been doing all of these years,
Mhm.
singularly as well as collectively.
Absolutely. And I like how you said that as blackbirds, crows, and then just having that aerial vision and the ability to move levels. That is so beautifully put. And what a great poem to reference. Maybe every 2 years I'll pick up that poem and I will always get something different. So thank you for bringing that up and the idea of birds. I love birds, and again, their social network is amazing. Maybe poets are crows, are blackbirds, among other things.
Well, why not? You can be whatever bird you want to be. I mean, there's the indigo bunting, which you can see down in South Carolina and along the coastal areas of the Carolinas and down into Georgia and Florida. And it's as colorful as a rainbow. And it's
Mhm.
small, a little bunting. I've only seen one. And when I saw it, it popped out of the bushes and the whole place lit up with this little tiny bird as colorful as the rainbow. The idea of the blackbirds, the murmuration of the blackbirds, the poets being birds or whatever we are, the main idea with this is we gather together in a community and we're very open to all of the voices that show up. I do want you to reflect on something, though. We are in a time when lots of differences are playing out in our culture, lots of political differences. I'm on one side, you're on another, you're on this side, I'm on that side. We agree, we disagree. How do we, as poets, expand our range so we can include the edges of things that we disagree with as well as the things that we embrace? Is that possible?
You know what? That is a really good question, James. And I think we have to process where we are and what we are feeling and write from that. And that's all we can do. There's a poem that I wrote called Morning After the Election, and I took the result of the 24 American election as an act of violence. Some people don't see it, some people were very happy. I did. And so while other people disagree with me, I can only write about what feelings I am feeling and what visions I am getting from that intensity, that blow, and describing what that blow is and recording flashes of memory and just sharing that without condemning. I can only just speak from the emotion that I felt. And hopefully that might put some perspective for people who don't agree with what I had felt. Regardless of that, whatever I wrote, I hope people will process it as a way of dealing with loss or not getting the outcome or the test result that you wanted, right? So all we can do is sing the octave between ash and mountain. That's all we can do, rather than trying to condemn, but really share the way that we are stunned or stunted from the intense feeling that we feel and the result of political action at this moment. Maybe there's other things that we can do.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned one disagreeing with how you feel or one disagreeing with how somebody else feels. And it made me think, how can one disagree with another's feelings? You can disagree with the factual aspects of what caused those feelings to happen, but not the feelings themselves. The feeling that one has bubbling up from the emotional atmosphere, the emotional inventory, is the truth of that moment for that person, not to be agreed with or disagreed with, to be experienced. And then maybe I make a conclusion that changes the way I see things. Maybe I disagree with your facts, or maybe I agree with them. But the emotional tone is something that we can just lean into and absorb, violent or peaceful, happy or sad,
Mhm.
angry. If I'm bewildered, I'm also in love. If I'm bewildered, I'm also angry. If I'm bewildered, I'm also happy because I'm not divorced from any of my emotions. My bewilderment just happens to be floating around at the top of the pile in that moment.
Right, right. And I think it's something with feelings because I'm in the classroom with my kids. I say poetry is intense feeling plus pictures. What is the feeling and what are the pictures that you get from that feeling that you have?
That's right.
Pictures are memories. And so intense feeling, that's what poetry slam is, right? It's intense feeling to the max and communicating that intense feeling. Working in a classroom of fifth graders, it's like, we're doing your I am poem. And an I am poem, everyone does it, but I leave my students with what's wrong with this poem? I am a ball, I'm a bat, I am a bee, I am me. So again, besides the detail, what is that story about? And what is what is the feeling, right? And what kind of mood do we want to bring, right? And what are the colors? You said colors before. So I think colors is a good thing.
Yeah. And the idea of I am reminds me of the verb to be in French, être. In French, they say raison d'être, the reason to
Mhm.
be. So the I am poem asks people to find reasons why they exist. Then from there, the meaning that you can bring to your existence from that I am place. I am here. Raison d'être, I exist, I be. I am in the be. Let be finale of seem, as Wallace Stevens says in The Emperor of Ice Cream. Let be. Don't do anything with it. Let it be. Here it sits. I am. I'm going to let that be back to feelings. I'll let these feelings be within this moment. And when you're generating material, you have thing, location, action, and
Mhm.
emotions.
Exactly. And also, when we perform on stage, we are becoming what we felt when we wrote the poem. We were trying to relive that, and we're trying to embody and communicate what it is we felt when we wrote the poem. We are transforming ourselves constantly, even if it's something that you wrote 30 years ago. We're still morphing it and becoming and living in that space as we become. So that's the beauty of performing the poem.
And in that translation from the potency of the emotion to the existence of the phrase on the page, much is lost.
Mm.
And naturally, I cannot capture in a phrase the potency of my awareness, the potency of my existence, but I can put something down that contains hints of it, and then you perform it, and hopefully it revitalizes and transforms, alchemizes into something else. So it's that constant churning.
Yes. And 30 years ago, I was dependent upon a live audience to figure out how this poem is working. And I would say over the last 15 years, I am not really dependent upon an open mic to share the latest thing that I've written. So if I publish something that I never even had a chance to perform in an open mic and people appreciate it, it's great. I just trust my own instinct and I just hope for the best. So for me, it is an evolution process. I'm going into this Emily Dickinson phase where I'm just like writing my poems. I'm not necessarily going to open mics. I enjoy my solitude. I don't need to go to the bar. I don't need to drink. I front loaded all of my drinking and all of my partying. It's such a different way of looking at my poetry. The last solo show that I did was maybe 2013. I am not existing in performance. All of my performance energy is in the classroom for seniors or for the youth.
I'm still performing for myself. I walk every day and recite poetry as I walk.
Mm.
And I do that regularly. And that's why I'm working on 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird. I memorized that poem years ago. I'm revisiting it. And I'll pick a piece like the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. I can do that all the way through. I don't perform it. I just walk around reciting it to myself. And I do it all the time. And what I've discovered, I'm just performing it in the sense of the act of speech, performativity without a goal, except to see what's next in the awareness of the relationship I'm developing intimately with whatever phrase I'm working with right now.
Yeah, well, that is really beautiful because when you say that you'll go for a walk, you'll recite. I don't know if you're reciting out loud or if
I
your
am.
lips are moving. So that kinesthetic exploration of such dense text of Eliot, it's got to really put you in some kind of meditative state. The walking and the air and whatever sound you're getting.
It is a meditative state. It is exciting. And what I'm discovering about this is how great a capacity I've come to believe we all have in our abilities to create our own personal stories around what we call dense text. Like in 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird, you have 13 ways of looking at the blackbird, right? And what was doing yesterday, I was creating stories. Like, first the blackbird is in the snowy mountains and the blackbird only has one eye. And then we move from the snowy mountains back to me. I'm underneath a tree, which is part of the snowy mountains. And there are three blackbirds in the tree. And I'm looking at the blackbirds. And then one blackbird blows out of the tree and it whirls in the wind. And I make little stories up around all of the things that I'm doing while these blackbirds are having their lives in this poem. And it's really interesting because I've come to think, and you work with students, the capacity we have to do that poetically is much, much larger than people usually think.
And then what you were just saying is so cinematic. You were tapping into the story of that poem. It's a cinematography and or the animation of that poem. What is the video of this poem? What is the music video if you were to put the visuals to the poem? It's exciting to take that text and to theatricalize it. I'm in a project where I'm taking some Langston Hughes poems and working with three women poets. They're doing group poems with Langston Hughes. The joy of exploring Langston Hughes and seeing that text, the poem that the show opens with, Seacom, how still, how strangely still the water is today. It is not good for water to be so still that way. And that's all that it is. But when you have three voices recited in a round, it does things, and then your body will follow. I can just listen to that repeated over and over with voices, and I won't get tired of it.
Can you do three voices just to give us an example of what it would sound like with three different voices?
Oh, it would be like three people, and it's like row, row, row your boat.
Oh,
So,
really?
so one person will say, "How still, how strangely still the water is today. It is not good for water to be so still that way. How still, how strangely still the water is today. It is not good for water to be so still that way." And then the third performer comes, and then they just do our rounds. The volume goes up, crescendos, and it just subsides. It was just a discovery, and it was just something to play with. But that's how the piece starts, taking Langston Hughes from that poem into I Too Am America, I Am the Darker Brother. You know, you take that sea from Africa, I think of the migration, and then it jumps to I Too Am America. Even though I'm not reciting it, it is recited to me as someone who's directing that, and it's just beautiful. Anyway, that's sort of the magic of the recitation. You know, poetry out loud is also another national school activity that I was not fond of because I didn't see the value of high school students performing old poems by dead poets. But then I realized the value of embodying, becoming a poem, changing yourself into a poem. So I've changed because I always thought that high school students can write a poem that's more relevant, but I have changed. And I was never a fan of Langston Hughes, but now I find him so compelling because I remember historically as an African American man in the 1920s to say, I too am America, and to be internationally known is such a huge feat. So I have looked at the poems again in an other light and in a more humble way. So,
The thing that I find interesting about your comments regarding what's relevant, the old poets, how could somebody bring something forward from 100 years ago and make it relevant today, give it meaning? It's relevant because we are relevant. It's relevant because I have an emotional interior. I have stories all housed inside my body, my instrument. So
mhm,
do you. We can recite exactly the same lines, very simple little lines on paper, and yet the subtext, the urgency, the need, the desire to do, to be, the raison d'etre, the reason why I am here, emerges in the spoken word. And it is relevant. It is today, no matter whether the poem was written 1,000 years ago. It comes forward. I think of Langston Hughes' poem, A Dream Deferred, which you probably are familiar with. What happens
mhm,
to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Does it fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat? Does it crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? So I've often heard people say that piece, oh, as in this urgency of, oh, I've deferred my dreams and it's so sad. And yet, when you listen to Billie Holiday sing Strange Fruit,
mm,
and you know Billie Holiday and Langston Hughes were both in Harlem at the same time, right? They probably
yeah,
had more than one coffee or whatever they had together. She's talking about somebody hanging in a tree. That's what Dream Deferred is as well, describing her song or the same sensibility. And when you realize that, it becomes much more challenging to perform it because the circumstances it's framing belong to people that have had similar experiences, but they don't belong to me. So anything I bring to that poem I have to have imaginative circumstances that probably won't match the power of that genius that lies in that simplicity that he offers, as did Billie Holiday.
Absolutely. There are some poems that I can do, some poems that I can't. In Langston Hughes' poem, there's a song, jazz band, play, play, play. I can't perform that well, but I do have a friend who's a DJ, rapper, poet, and he's able to make magic out of that. It's just beautiful to see how that works across gender.
And when you start to trust yourself as the performer, as the speaker, as the poet, as the talent, and you trust that whatever is there is what needs to be there in that moment, then it changes the way one perceives what performance is supposed to be. And it becomes what it is in the moment. And it's real in that moment. And then the next moment it changes. And then it changes again and again and again and again.
And hopefully it changes, right? Hopefully, if the performer's done their job, you'll get those changes and all of those levels.
It's inevitable. The job for the performer is to understand the inevitability of it and then to take the inevitability of, I am here right now with this emotional texture. I'm going to let that be in the poem, and I'm going to let the person watching me perform it see me experience this that I didn't know existed. And thus they experience something they didn't know exist. It's a bit of a circle like the earth spinning.
And I love that. I love emotional texture and earth spinning. It is a together process where we are all dreaming together, right? Because storytelling is when we dream together. And so when you recite that, we are living in that dream.
It's quite a bit like a dream, trusting the dream state, which we all participate in. Some of us remember it more than others, but everybody participates in it. It's there as a resource, as a basis for all of this creative work we do. And that collaboration between the imaginative mind, the rational mind, the dream state, and the text that appears, that's what makes whatever you write, whatever I write, whatever we push out, that's what makes it unique, unusual, and meaningful for others. And it belongs to all of us. That's what everybody can do, not just you, not just me. I'm curious, do you have something you'd like to read for us?
It took me 30 years to get my first book of poetry. The book is called A Rabbit in Search of a Rolex. In order for me to not get intimidated about writing a book, I had to make it a project. So I decided to do 50 poems that were no more than 4 sentences. And they were meditations on things like Langston Hughes, croissants, hammock, hinoki, onomatopoeia. And I would just close my eyes and just see what I would get. Because we're talking about Langston Hughes, I'll read this. It's called Langston Hughes. Blue stars burst in my pants. I tell the poet that his poems have a fierce swing. And you make me explode, says the poet with a wink. Flashing eyes that are bright and gay. I wink back. We survive the dream deferred. A chorus line of dancing raisins sing, We are the dream.
When you know the dream deferred has the meaning that it has, it really adds a layer to the comment that you made. Read a few more. You have a book there in front of you. Let's have some Reggie.
All right, terrific. Croissants. I am a croissant in a rehab circle with other pastries. The blueberry muffin discloses their toasted lifestyle. I get triggered by the donut exposing its jelly filling. I have a crush on a churro. Last night, we knocked ourselves into a singular cinnabon, rolling around in butter. Hammock. I have fallen in the universe's hammock. I listen to the trees, walk and skip around me. I am the white rabbit in search of a Rolex. I feel the kindness of dice roll around my knees. Onomatopoeia. I attend the opera naked, sit on a red IKEA folding chair. From my balcony, the blood orange lunar eclipse dissolves with the cream cheese clouds. DuPont Comedy Club. A sparrow claims to be the Twitter bird. Give it the olive branch. I reach for its beak, and my arm becomes a fluffy baguette. The host reminds me of the two baguette minimum. I leave the show unpet. Metformin. I open a bottle and white ghosts dance around me. I am starring in diabetic fantasia. I twirl and my toes snap off, becoming more ghosts. As I dance, my bones shed, becoming part of the prescription ballet. Charcuterie board. A boar's head appears on a plate. Flying piglets descend upon the boar and take it towards the sun, piercing the horizon. Stanley Tucci asks, "Do you know these piglets?" I reply, "Just because I'm Filipino doesn't mean I'm part of the piglet community." Wakanda. Wakanda Maganda. Wakanda Maganda. Wakanda Maganda. I hear the chanting and drums of my Filipino ancestors. Lapu Lapu rises from a mist with wings on his feet, splits a bamboo spear where Malakas, the strength of wind, and Maganda, beauty, merge. The Wakandans hand me the Book of Woke to keep me dreaming in gender fluidity. Woods. I am at the fairy garden seeking fairies for fun and philanthropy. The forest informs me that a witch trafficked all the fairies to a wish factory. My crystal ball fairy tracker finds the fairies spinning straw into future stories, crank through a Ferris wheel, feeding plot twists to the overthinking monster of despair. Frida Kahlo. A loudspeaker informs me that I am a tribute in the fashion games. We must create a wardrobe of exquisite quality, or we will die by scotch tape flies. Frida Kahlo tells me, "I will help you win by wiring chains of shooting stars through a gown of elegant cassowary feathers." Arboretum. A man I'm smitten by leads me across a meadow. He tells me that he is smitten by me. We stumble in lilac lands. Love is a bit like lilac lands, I tell him. You just never expected to get there till you smell the lilacs together. Multiverse. Butterflies and bees buzz and flutter, protecting the earth with a sonic shield from viruses. No amoebas are predators. The owl eggs hatch with empathy. Raven. A poet has died. I read it from the angle of moonbeams. Sinead O'Connor sings, "This passing shall hurt you severely." I'd like to learn of a poet's death from ravens delivering me tea cakes and champagne. I see the poet's face behind me in the bathroom mirror. How many poems will it cost to bring you back? Edward Hopper. I'm jealous of the sky, Hopper says. Breathe it in, I say. Am I stoned or a canvas? Did I still life myself into a pebble? Am I not worthy of skipping on a lake's surface tension? A shot of orange color hits me with atomic force. I am expansive lava, meteor. Tooth Fairy. The Tooth Fairy is wearing a bomber jacket and jeans. Are you gay? I ask him. No, he says, I'm a fairy. I offer to buy some teeth from him. For $1, I get a grab bag. Those are my baby teeth, I tell him. Then you can just have them, he says, and disappears.
Bravo. Bravo. Oh, I absolutely love those pieces. Oh my goodness. That must make you feel really, really good to have those.
It feels good to have a book after 30 years of resisting biting my nails over the book. And I think when the pandemic happened, it was like, Reggie, if you're alive, you just have to just make a book. Don't think about it. 50 of these short things, find an order, find an ending, and just do it. And I did it. And, you know, the question is, what will my next book be? I can breathe a little bit. Now that I got these short poems, maybe I'll put the long poems. Again, when you have been writing for 3 decades, where do you go? And I had to go with my writing process during the pandemic, which was to hide under a blanket and to write one poem every night and just to close my eyes and, think of Hinoki or what is the theme or a word and like close my eyes, use every poetic device to find 4 sentences to tell a short little story, tease repetition if I couldn't get anywhere. It was a gift for me, a way to work with vocal loss. I lost my voice. Not being able to speak meant that the words were so important and making them short. And even though I can't speak, I can write. And even though I can't speak it in the way that I could, writing was the last connection that I had. And as a performer, when you can't speak, it's devastating.
It's interesting for me. I've always spoken. I love the spoken word. I love storytelling. I love to speak words. I love to talk. I love to do these radio shows one after the other for 9 years. And what I have come around to thinking, based on what you said about, well, what's next? When's the next book? When's the next one? It's right now. Here we are back to I am the moment. We are born over and over every second. And this is new, even though you and I have known each other since 1994, which is 30 years. That's a long time.
Mhm.
And I remember Asheville and I remember the Green Door. And I remember everybody walking into that beautiful venue and performing their poetry on stage. And we all lined up in the street out back behind the Green Door. For those of you who are listening in Asheville, the Green Door, it was in downtown Asheville on Carolina Lane. You can still walk down Carolina Lane. The Green Door would be on your right. It's no longer green. It's not even the door that was there. It's red now. The venue is no longer there. It's just a basement where people store things. Back then, it was a radiating basement filled with poets. So I remember all of those moments 30 years ago. And the thing I remember most about it, it seemed brand new, like it would never, ever change. And then it did. And now we're still here. And yet every day is as brand new as the memory I have of those moments when we gathered there at the Green Door in downtown Asheville.
Yeah, wow. And the fact that we are together, and I don't think that we could have ever dreamed in 1994 that we would be speaking, looking at each other, you in Manila, I in Washington, D.C., and that we could live, and this is part of our existence, and that we can enjoy poetry through a podcast or through YouTube or newsletters or texts, right? It's just incredible. And I just want to respond when you're talking about the book, because I know that you wrote a book about going through cancer. And I think that the despair I felt in the pandemic and my voice, there's nothing like despair that will just force out something about the mortality and the despair where you can just carve a diamond. And for me, that's what the book is. You know, there's happy things, sad things, but it was just a testimony to living. And I also wrote a play during that time because I wanted to archive what was happening. So again, despair can be a good motivator for every artist. You know, every time I've had books, it's either been through breakup or infatuation and young love. I was dating a younger guy and the book came out. It shook me out. We can only live and be aware and record, right?
And almost anything can fuel one's poetic, artistic momentum. You gave me some insight just now. Speaking of despair being a motivator, when I wrote this book right after my surgery for prostate cancer, I had surgery. I had my prostate removed. My prostate did have cancer all on it. It didn't jump the margins, although I didn't know that when the operation happened. I had to wait 7 or 8 days to find out if I needed radiation or chemotherapy or any of that. So there was this lag time. And in that window, and I just came to this just now, Reggie, I thought, I'm finished. This is it. I've now had this operation. I'm now 61. I'm 75 now, so I've moved down quite a
What?
ways.
You look like you're like 30. You look like you did 30 years ago.
Well, I'm seven. I may, but I'm grateful that I'm still standing here talking to you. At the time, though, at 61, I was thinking, this is when I enter my decline. I felt like I was going to enter that decline the day after the surgery, something about the removal of the prostate, taking away all the vitality that one has because of the prostate. And then what's after that? I had no idea. I did have an inkling, though. I thought, if I write one something every day for 100 days, that will be the connection I can keep to whatever's on the other side that will allow me to re-enter the momentum in a new way. It actually worked. So relevance was my driver, not despair, relevance. And underneath that, desperation, because I thought I was finished. Now, I've never said that before till just now. I thought it slightly, but now I see what that was. Relevance and desperation. Those were the things that drove me.
And that is such a powerful epiphany. I've never heard it said like that, but what you just said is a parallel process. It is to hold on to the earth, right? It is my caveman painting. It is the way that I can just hold on. It is the raft. There is an other plane. And after going through that, you're a lot wiser and you know a little bit more and you know that there's more. I think if there's anything from this conversation, we write to hold onto the raft and to say, I am here, among other things. To my kids, you are here. You can say it the way that you can say it. Your I am poem is your own. And if you don't say it, somebody will say it for you. And if I don't have my book, people will try to gather it. That's the other motivation because I do not want other people to construct all of my poems. I don't want them to have to clean up. I would rather make my book before a collective of my friends start to do it. And maybe your book is about cleaning up. Maybe it's about cleanup and organization.
Well, I was going to say it's about organization. We talk about creativity all the time. Oh, some people say I don't have any creativity in me, but you actually have plenty of creativity. What we need the confidence that we have the capacity to organize the stuff. It's like I'm going to organize my groceries now that I brought them home. I'll put them in the refrigerator. The same organizational principles that allow you to know the frozen blueberries go in the freezer and the milk goes in the refrigerator part is the same organizational ability one has to put a poem together. It's the same thing, and it's not that complicated, and yet it sometimes can be quite daunting because there's so many elements. There's such an inventory that we have that to put together. But I like the idea of that holding on. You were grasping the bottle. We're on the screen, you and I'm looking at you holding the water bottle right now. And I felt that way, and I've had other people report to me they feel the same way. I'm holding on to something, and we're in a journey. We're on a journey, and we're following a road, and often in the poetic journey, the road dips down and it disappears. And then it dips down again and it disappears and it keeps disappearing. And we follow it. And we follow it knowing at some point we too, like the road, will disappear. But we're holding on to the poetic sensibilities as we follow the road that's disappearing, suggesting we will too, but not today.
But not today. But not today, for sure. But not today. And you know what? Maybe not ever, right? What is it afterwards? We can only imagine. Not to be morose. Our feelings have to go somewhere, and our memories have to go somewhere. So,
and I think you might agree with this. The somewhere that our feelings, our memories, and our spirits go, that somewhere is right here. We never leave this place. We just change form. And infinity is where we all belong. That's where we have always existed, and we always will exist there.
May I be a blackbird on a snowy mountain with other blackbirds singing poetry.
Regie, thank you so much for being on Twice 5 Miles Radio.
This is so exciting and such an honor. And I thank you so, so much for the invitation. And I have to see you in Manila.
I would love that. Before we go, tell people how to get in touch with you.
Very simple email, Regie, Regie, Regie.Cabico, CAB as in boy, ICO @gmail.com. I don't have an official website. I look forward to hearing from folks. So thank you so much.
You're welcome, Regie. I appreciate it. And there you go, my friends. Thus concludes my conversation with Regie Cabico. And since Regie and I were talking about Wallace Stevens, and we mentioned it and touched on it a bit, I'd like to read two of Wallace Stevens' poems for you. The first one is 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird, which I referenced a couple of times. Also, The Emperor of Ice Cream. Keep in mind, when you're listening to these two poems, they make imaginative sense. They don't necessarily make intellectual sense. And yet, if you look at them long enough, if you play around with them long enough, I've memorized both of them, I'm beginning to understand the intellectual side of what these poems offer. I also have a sense of the emotional side as well. So let's begin with 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird by Wallace Stevens. 1. Among 20 snowy mountains, the only moving thing was the eye of the blackbird. 2. I was of 3 minds, like a tree, in which there are 3 blackbirds. 3. The blackbird whirled in the autumn winds. It was a small part of the pantomime. 4. A man and a woman are one. A man and a woman and a blackbird are one. 5. I do not know which to prefer, the beauty of inflections or the beauty of innuendos, the blackbird whistling, or just after. 6. Icicles filled the long window with barbaric glass. The shadow of the blackbird crossed it, to and fro. The mood traced in the shadow an indecipherable cause. 7. O thin men of Haddam, why do you imagine golden birds? Do you not see how the blackbird walks around the feet of the women about you? 8. I know noble accents and lucid, inescapable rhythms, but I know too that the blackbird is involved in what I know. 9. When the blackbird flew out of sight, it marked the edge of many circles. 10. At the sight of blackbirds flying in a green light, even the bawds of euphony would cry out sharply. 11. He rode over Connecticut in a glass coach. Once a fear pierced him, in that he mistook the shadow of his equipage for blackbirds. 12. The river is moving. The blackbird must be flying. 13. It was evening all afternoon. It was snowing, and it was going to snow. The blackbird sat in the cedar limbs. And so that was 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird by Wallace Stevens. And as you'll recall, when Reggie read his poetry, there was a sense of brevity in what he was offering, and it was very easy to see the images when he read. I had the same experience with 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird when I first encountered it, and even now, I still have that same experience. And so now I'm going to turn to The Emperor of Ice Cream by Wallace Stevens. And this is a bit different. It's fragmented in a sense, and yet it does have somewhat of a narrative. The setting is a wake. Someone has died. People are gathering and they're eating, thus ice cream. It's set at a time when refrigeration wasn't as popular as it is today, so ice cream was a bit more of a rarity. You had to keep it cold, and if you didn't have a freezer, you didn't have ice cream. So the ice cream being made at the wake is the celebratory part, and then there's the part of the person who's already died. So here is The Emperor of Ice Cream by Wallace Stevens. Call the roller of big cigars, the muscular one, and bid him whip in kitchen cups concupiscent curds. Let the wenches dwaddle in such dress as they are used to wear, and let boys bring flowers in last month's newspapers. Let B be finale of seam. The only emperor is the emperor of ice cream. Take from the dresser of deal, lacking the 3 glass knobs, that sheet on which she embroidered fantails once, and spread it so as to cover her face. If her horny feet protrude, they come to show how cold she is and dumb. Let the lamp affix its beam. The only emperor is the emperor of ice cream. That was The Emperor of Ice Cream. So there you go, 2 poems from Wallace Stevens, 13 Ways of Looking at a Blackbird and The Emperor of Ice Cream. So I hope you enjoyed those poems. I also hope you enjoyed Reggie's poetry and what he had to say, what I had to say. I love speaking with people whom I've known for many, many years, like Regie. We've shared a lot of poetry together, Regie and I, years ago. Haven't seen him in ages. Still, though, when you connect with somebody you've known in the past like that, you can move forward fairly fast into the present and be somewhat current. So I'm glad he's still doing what he does. I'm glad I'm doing what I do. I'm glad you're out there doing whatever it is you do. And I appreciate you listening to this show. I really do appreciate it. Twice 5 Miles Radio. Fertile ground for conversations worth listening to and remembering. I'm your host, James Navé, always airing first on WPVM-LP, Asheville, 103.7, streaming online, WPVMFM.org, the voice of Asheville heard all over the world, and on other community radio stations like KCEI, Cultural Energy Radio out of Taos, New Mexico. Thank you, Walter Parks, for our theme song, walterparks.com. For more on Walter's music, thank you, Devine Dial, for managing WPVM-FM in Asheville, and Robin Collier, thank you for managing KCEI, Cultural Energy Radio, in Taos, New Mexico. I really appreciate it so much. If you'd like to reach me, Navé at jamesnavé.com. I would love to hear from you. I get very few emails. I'm running a little test. I'd like to see who emails me just because you can. So if you have a story to tell or you'd like to reach out, Navé at jamesnavé.com. I would love to be surprised by something you have to say. Navé at jamesnavé.com. And I'd also like to remind you that we're sponsored by the Imaginative Storm Writing Project. If you'd like to improve your writing chops, become the writer that you want to be, imaginativestorm.com is a good place to start that process. And we also have some free workshops you can drop into. It's as much a community as it is a place where you can find tools for making your writing come true, creating the work you want to create to become the writer you want to be. imaginativestorm.com. So once again, thank you ever so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. And hey, come back sometime soon. And until then, I'll catch you on that turnaround somewhere down the line.